no.
Thank you so much.
We have Mike Miller on it all? No. Not yet. Everybody see that we had an announcement about We Grant yesterday? No. With a due date like in September. Well. New round of application. Governor has like 300 something dollars. Money. Yeah, so CFA is end of July and we sometime in September. Get other people who are looking for WIP or anything for projects. Guess we're kind of getting to the end of the projects anyway, but
Yeah, but still, I mean, the hose only for grants to get everything done.
are we ready?
We're ready to rock and roll.
Okay. Then I guess we'll call the order for Albany. We got Chris Powers, who's from Albany, plus he's our treasurer, myself, Bill Simcoe, as a president. We've got Gary here from Green Island, along with Maggie from Rock Island. We got Bill here from Rensselaer. We got Andrew from Troy, and you want to introduce your soon-to-be designee?
Yeah, absolutely. This is Christine Aramanak. Am I pronouncing this correctly? Christine Aramanak. She is project supervisor with Public Utilities now, and will also be a designee once we get all the paperwork situated.
Hey, welcome, Christine. We also have Mark and Tom from CDRPC, and nobody on. No, not yet. On Zoom. We usually have Mike Miller from the engineering joint venture team. So we got a forum and we're ready to do business. So people want to take a minute to look at the minutes and see if there's any.
You know, it's one thing that it doesn't really matter, but at that meeting, Gary was here representing Green Island, and I was representing Gulf.
Right.
Yeah, Gary is now not Cahoes.
Right, just Green Island. Whereas Bill is Rensselaer and Gulf.
So Bill does double duty for. That's the code. So that could get modified in the board members designates. Anything else we need to know? Then can I have a motion to approve minutes?
I'll make a motion.
Billy, in a second. Bill, all in favor? Aye. Opposed, motion carries. Financial report from Tom?
Hey, we're still holding at just shy of $35,000 in the bank. We have a bill to pay, and I'll forward that voucher along later today to Chris and Martin to sign, so we can pay CDRPC. I only put in the $9,000 as opposed to the total because I believe
We got the
are
grant
good.
extended.
Okay. So even though it was approved at the total at last month's meeting, it's only been denied. So,
An extension of
the grant. Okay. We're at 22% completion on the long-term control plan projects, 43% completed on our administrative expenses. Those are fairly much in order. And that's where we are. Any questions?
I'm trying to say 22%,
For all for the, against budget for this year,
just for this year, okay.
just for the projects. Yeah, just over 2.3 million against the $10 million project.
Because overall, we're probably 90%,
Well, yeah, I mean, when you look at the entire long-term control
What
plan
percentage
from
is that?
inception to date, that is virtually complete with the exception of some stragglers, Gary. Got one more thing going and a couple other things going.
Mark, I don't know if you could bring up the third, SharePoint. I just wanted to, I've had good looks at our office trying to gather information. Just trying to get all the information that we have from EFC for everybody's finances, so we show what invoices were paid against what disbursements. So you go to their corporation. I think there's a disbursement, EFC disbursements. So these are all the project financings, and there's a folder for long term and a folder for short term. And so if you go to like 1400 short term, click on long term. Yeah, click on one of those. Yeah, so the first page, whenever EFC sends out a disbursement, the first page just kind of indicates what the amount being paid and whether it's grant or whether it's financing. The second page, you go to the next page, there's what invoices were paid under that disbursement. So we're trying to make sure that Tom has all that information so he can reconcile what's owed between communities, what got paid out from EFC, so we can try to
That's where
have that all backed up and have all that information in SharePoint, and so it can all be audited. Makes sense.
And if any community has received EFC money, I'll obviously make sure that those bills and invoices are presented to them for reimbursement to whichever project it went to.
And sometimes there's a note on these as to whether there was grants that reduced the amount, and sometimes there's notes on these about reduced amount because of one reason or another. EFC decided to reduce what was submitted. So.
Yes, there are routinely happening notes on there, and it's there, identifying which payments or which disbursements were reduced for any reason, whether it be a grant or an adjustment to the function. One of the things I will need now to deal with is that EFC applied grants differently than we applied grants. So and specifically to Albany, because Chris and I have had this conversation, that if we applied a grant to an invoice or didn't, let's say, and EFC did, I can't ask the community to pay what they didn't get dispersed on. So that amount has to then be readjusted someplace to account for that grant differential.
There's a lot of different.
I don't know how I'm going to do it.
There's a lot of different circumstances that, but I think the goal is to be able to kind of
Collect everything and pay out everything.
with this year take care of a lot of this stuff, so we don't have much remaining after this year. I mean, the program goes to 2027, but I think we'll have drawn down most of these finances pretty much, and just have a little bit to deal with after.
So I have to apologize. I'm behind on getting invoices out to people that I promised in the past. only because I haven't been able to figure out some of the old stuff as efficiently as I hoped I could.
Yeah, if you go back to the, that SharePoint drive, and if you go, I guess up. Yeah. If you go to our 1404 in here. So like for town, 1404 for us is the most active one. So for like Cohoes projects, for your floatable facility for level C and Manor.
So I'll pull those out and get the, whatever's open out to you.
And then Chris's or Andrew's 01. So the ones that are most active right now is Albany's at 1404 and Troy's 0501. So I think there's like three, if you open that up, Mark. There's been three disbursement.
We've been getting a few of those figured out recently.
So those have money that should be going to Cohoes.
Yeah. I'll
Which-
crack on that this week.
Okay, yeah, because I know that we're gonna be needing money ASAP.
Yeah.
Harbor's proceeding now with, well, see, probably what,
We're gonna mobilize on, first week of July.
okay,
Okay, so I'll make it a point to work on the Cohoes, the EFC disbursements to the different communities that are focused on Cohoes, so I can ask for those reimbursements to CSO so that get it over to us.
Yeah, and they'll, pay us, I haven't really got an answer in regard to how the grant for the ordinance is gonna be.
it's reimbursable. So, I don't think it's like a GIGP where there are specific items that are eligible. I think it's just. Get close to everything. Yeah, get this, I mean, the project itself or so, we're getting like 430,000 or something like that on it. All right, whereas it's a 1,061,000.
So that's not a cost incurred under that,
It is cost incurred to get reimbursed.
that was did that say, WIA grant?
Yes. I think it is. Yeah,
Yeah, so, when the grant and the financing were both with us, we've normally drawn down half of the grant. And then have to draw down financing and then get the other half at the end of the project. I just wondered if that 400 and some thousand goes as grant, how that was gonna get drawn down, or how that affects what the cost.
this is the first WIA grant that we've had.
Yeah,
We had a WQIP before, hadn't been any problem. But WIA,
yeah,
no.
because for our disbursement and for Andrew's disbursement, it's that grant money gonna get drawn down,
Right, right.
yeah,
I have no.
I don't know.
or is he gonna net out the grant portion out of our disbursement stuff?
Are you still doing the 2-week thing with EFC?
Yeah.
You know, maybe that's one of the questions that ought to be asked from Paul.
Yeah, I got asked a couple of times.
I thought that they said, didn't I hear him say that we would do the grant money first?
That's what I was hoping,
That's what I thought he said, when we had that meeting a couple weeks ago.
but I think the problem is you didn't actually get an executed finance agreement. Or have you got that in place now?
We didn't by the time I retired out of Cohoes. However, Sharon got something, but I don't know whether it's Little C, because we had, we've got so many grants. Or we got one, but I can't remember.
Let me verify that. But
Yeah, maybe find out before Tuesday's, the next
Mm.
Tuesday meeting, but whether that's already executed.
Yeah.
The easiest way is to use the grant money first, get rid of it, and then we can,
I agree.
distribute the money amongst the pool communities
Mm.
on the financing, and that's a clear separation. Which I guess, Tom, from what you were saying, wasn't happening
But-
before.
No, it was.
Yeah.
So, we were getting money and potentially charging the pool communities for grant money that they weren't on the hook for.
Mm.
And
Well,
vice versa, right?
The application is that I don't know when that grant money was paid. I'm using Albany as an example.
Yeah.
That first time.
Well, yeah, and typically they've had us use GIG, WQIP before we start using EFC money, but in this case, I don't know. We really like that to be the case, and then our eligible amount would be reduced by the grant, and makes sense. But whether the EFC will do it then.
Yeah, I don't know, like I said, we've never had a WIA grant before, and the other thing is, we're not doing the finance with EFC, that's just a grant.
Mm.
So,
But it's pretty much the same working law, I think. So let's find out and try to know that before Carver has their first payout, which could be in a month, I suppose. Do they already have a payout bill?
No, and I don't expect one probably until August.
Oh, okay.
so you got a little bit of breathing room, but time's going quick.
Yeah.
Okay, so vendor invoices,
There's only the one that Andrew.
okay. And yeah, I think Andrew, I had email asking if we could maybe mark up.
Yeah, I sent one back, I do believe,
Did you
right?
send something back? I may have,
Yeah, that I signed and dated and put TDO3 on it.
okay,
I can submit that again. Well, so I think it'd be wise for me just to reach out to CDM Smith and see if I can get this, this 300640 Campbell Ave sewer. If I could just, change how they're marking it to Cross Street Rehabilitation TDO3, have them put that right on the invoice. Or I'll
Yeah.
sign every single one every time.
yeah,
That makes sense.
Yeah, because that's what the project's named in the control plan. Okay.
yeah, and if there's a reference to their task order.
Right, okay. And you want me to, I can find that other one and send it to everybody again.
So, and I have a resolution to pay the, motion to pay the,
I'll make a motion.
Gary, have a second? Well, all in favor?
I,
Opposed? Motion carries. So EFC disbursements and reconciliations, we kind of have talked about, project dates. We, into Troy's. Cameron Boulevard. Whether it's going out to bid soon, whether it's
we're
approved.
getting dangerously close to approval. I can feel it. Yeah, yes.
Is Mike Burgess revealed it or who's?
So get back from, no more comments from EFC. Liam Hanley from EEC just wants to see, data change. I forget it was one thing, but essentially it was down to, like it said, draft somewhere in the form, and now we needed to have it, it needs to be like, these are the final plans with the engineered stamp. And then at that point, we're ready to do some bidding and get some, start the actual project, so.
Okay. So that, is going out to bid soon.
Yes, it should be. I'm hoping within, whether we do that before this next meeting, I don't know, but we might revisit it then, but it's close, I can feel it. Yeah, it's good.
Hopefully that's not yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I hope, sewer gas, big guy, I don't know.
Okay, so, and, Rose has got the project that Carver's will see.
Yep, they're getting ready to, that said they'll be mobilizing on first week of July, with a little delay because, change, these modifications to the electric, from a portable generator to an outside generator, change the penetrations in the building. But,
So that's, going ahead in, the other project,
and our avenue was, we were hoping for a mid-May seal. And we report to ESD and BC, and as of, earlier this week, my discussions with Paul Barber is gonna be.
are they gonna, do any grants? Submit on that?
That I'm not sure of it. I'd have to talk to, Sharon and find out. We don't actually know. They were trying to tailor the, work done to the price that was available. So, at our last meeting, they gave us a laundry list of things, it shows, 3 areas. That basically is what
If you're doing WQIP, would you have to have bond resolutions and seeker ship out stuff for WQIP? That'd be.
You don't, I don't think you need a bond resolution with the application. You do have to have seeker, but the report itself had to have seeker anyway. Up to that point, usually they'll condition it that, okay, this is fine for the engineering report. When you get into plans and specs and bid it, you're gonna have to do another analysis to make sure that, everything is still kosher. But typically, yeah, we get that short order. CHA typically does that for us. And we had talked prior with CHA, and we emphasized that we want to go after any type of funding that's available. You know, whether it's WIA, WQIP, whatever. So,
Okay, so,
but you need to improve engineering.
yeah, the engineers report for that. If you're gonna, do ship like kind of stuff and stuff.
Yeah, this particular project too did have a, engineering project grant. $50,000, and I think we ended up doing a little bit extra work, so I believe CHA cost was about 72,000. It's a TV work.
Yeah, so we haven't done too much with our eliminating our two CSO open function. That we're gonna ask for some forgiveness in regard to the deadline because of that stadium project. So I guess it depends on who the powers that be are gonna be. But something's gonna happen in that when we park area, we just.
Is that part, well, if you know, is that part of an area that may be covered by some of that $250 million that's coming from the state?
Yeah, it was gonna be 400 million, but
50 is.
150 was gonna be for the museum and.
Yes.
And Liberty Park really was identified as a key area, and the soccer stadium was one idea. There've been other proposals for commercial development in that area, but the, developers haven't been that interested in that kind of thing, so the economy, is kind of what drives redevelopment downtown. But if a stadium goes through, there might need to be relocation of the county interceptor sewer to totally change whatever we're trying to do, regulating chamber. And actually,
Why don't you just build a canal there?
that's.
That was one suggestion.
We could, daylight the, county interceptor sewer.
There you go.
Yeah, but that-
Kayaking tournaments and races in there.
Now,
but then-
worry about taking down 787, however.
With the county purification district, like the daylight thing?
Yeah, that's on the top of her.
No, that's, actually, it was relocated when they built that Greyhound bus station. So if you changed again. Yeah,
They
that's,
did that for the DEC building.
Yeah.
And they ended up, the county interceptor bisected that parcel. And they ended up putting like two legs of the triangle in. The only thing is though, when they did that, we now have a level interceptor sewer in that area and the district has to go and clean it out. Because of the grades, they lost the pitch on the sewer. So they could build the DEC building.
well, it went around the parking garage and then, so. And also, went underneath, it's underneath the DC building.
Yeah.
So. It goes into.
Bill, before I forget, could you, when you have a chance, just sign that NT notice to proceed for little C?
Okay,
I'm sure you did it before, but I don't have it among my collection.
okay. So, I think the project updates, there were couple of things I wanted to mention in regard to other business, and one is in your package. There's a couple of things. One is this estimate of the cost of, Albany satellite treatment facilities. The IMA for this project. I guess the other thing is this page here, the intermunicipal agreement and this matrix of responsibility. And there were some items that were shown as being Albany full communities. And the second page of this matrix of responsibility had the GI projects. Some responsibilities shared amongst the full communities. And then the last page has the satellite treatment facilities and shared costs between the communities. And the sheet the spreadsheet on Albany satellite treatment facilities is indicating what kind of a cost we think would be the shared costs of Beaver Creek and for potable facilities that have pumping stations, which are the ones at Orange Street, Quackenbush and Livingston. So, as the long-term control plan was formulated, really Albany ended up with all the satellite treatment facilities except for the one in Cahoon on level C. And so the intention of the intermunicipal agreement was that these costs would be shared. And what this is showing is how that share would break out at the bottom between the various communities. Of course, the biggest two percentage-wise are Albany and Troy. And Albany shown here is at 319,000 and Troy at 189,000. So we had discussion previously about whether we needed a new IMA. And I had talked to House and Russ, Chris Canada, and Joe Scott about whether we could engage them in regard to this matter. Beverage and Diamond and Isaac Ross and fiscal advisors were all involved in the original IMA. And Hudson Russ is willing to work with us on this, and Joe Scott, although he's planning on retiring, is still around. And
He's still around.
he's still around. He's trying to phase Chris Canada
Okay.
into this thing, because he doesn't want to toss Chris Canada completely into the alphabet soup of the long-term plan.
It's hard to leave when you know where all the bodies are buried.
It's true. And of course, Mark is, there'd be a question about whether this body should continue. We know we have some years that we're gonna need perhaps to be continuing for the post-construction compliance monitoring plan. Depending on what's found with the post-construction and compliance monitoring plan, will there be an extension or a new consent order, or what will happen? So, will we have a new IMA? Will CDRPC still be administrator? Is CDRPC still interested in being administrator in the future? We would hope they would, but
Yeah, I mean, and one other thing I was thinking about for all those kinds of projects, but the biggest example is the satellite treatment facility is oversight. So, I mean, I'm sure your bosses are gonna say, well, Albany can just send us a bill for whatever they're spending and we have no say in what they're spending. So I mean, that is likely gonna have to be part of it, like what role will the other communities have on reviewing cost of facility, you know?
so, yeah, having a third party minister and still having a deliberative body like ours to continue, it seems like it still might be a good way to go.
And it certainly doesn't need to be as active. Or, you know, just, even if we do like provide that role just to convene, to, you know, review some of the shared costs on an annual basis, semi-annual basis, quarterly basis, that would be a good idea.
One question I've got is, if I remember right, we had Beverage and Diamond with the consent order, which they did a very good job on advising us on seeker and stuff like that. And then we went out with an RF
For local council,
for local council. And we had,
White and Oscar.
yeah, on board. If we want Joe Scott, which makes sense because he's very involved in the project, do we have to go on out with another request for proposals?
It depends on, well, there's also the issue of applying any grant funds for this work. Because if you wanted to use the shared services grant, you would need an MWPE waiver and all that crap. Not crap, stuff. Whether or not we need an RFP, it depends on the size of the procurement. This board adopted some sort of procurement, I don't know what they are. But that'll determine, you know, what we think we have to do. There is a case to be made where you could sole source it if he was heavily involved in, you know, the development of the documents in the beginning, because, you know, the learning curve on something like this is very steep and it would take a long time for people to dig into it. So the value proposition of going with somebody familiar is that it's gonna take them less time to do.
And the existing IMA would be the template for the new IMA.
Correct.
Really would just be adding some language in regard to payments and when payments.
Maybe just an amendment to the existing item.
Maybe just an amendment.
23.
I know going back to each of the mayors and folks in the communities with something that might be the toughest part is explaining and so.
Instead of you having to build your own sewage treatment plant, this is what we did. This is how much you have to pay.
The problem is is what Bill was saying, because on some of the communities like Cohoes, probably Green Island, you gotta bring it before the legislative bodies for approval.
Mhm.
So not only do you have to convince the mayors, which may not be that difficult, you also have to convince everybody on all the boards at the same time, so, yeah.
It's an additional, percent. Because they have choice.
And true, but I'm not sure about water delete and whether, because. Do we have water delete on?
Yes,
Yeah,
Melissa's online
Send
now.
Melissa. Are you hearing us?
She's on mute. I can check with Melissa though. I'll be seeing her on something else.
Yeah, and one other thing in regard to costs, which really aren't shown here, but, the Albany County Water Purification District may also be looking at a cost to be added to these costs. Because, Angelo and operational folks are concerned about the additional solids and sludge that coming to the south plant and,
They can burn it all now. There's no mercury regulations.
so that's, we've got some representation here from there, although it's not official, but Maggie and Gary are both on the board. So whether that needs to be defined.
Yeah, we can talk with Angela. No, we were talking about the other capital improvements that need to be done at the south and north plants.
Yeah, I think part of this Albany County Water Purification District getting a new squeeze permit for the south plant was some discussion that the Beaver Creek Satellite Treatment Facility and the long-term control plan were part of the reasons why they should stick with that 45 MGD maximum through the south plant. Because they had this funny number of 56 MGD that,
Yeah.
came on some previous DEC calculation.
Correct. Yeah. Both south and north plant, there were numbers that. Not sure where they came from.
Gary, I can tell you, we get charged 8 million per year for both of those plants to support their operation. And we don't, as far as I can tell, it was an agreement that was signed long ago. And with respect to audit visibility, we get a bill, but it doesn't, in my view, detail exactly what we're paying for to a sufficient degree. So just but we're all taking some kind of bite in that direction, but yeah, it gets complicated when they're sharing facilities,
Yeah, and I think I recently had some discussion with Angela, who's applying for some EFC money.
Oh, we are.
About doing these EDU calculations and how it seems to be such a problem.
Well, as I explained to Angela yesterday, the EDU calculation is EPA's idea 40 years ago. That had been a big deal 40 years ago because not that many communities had water meters in a large scale throughout their system. You fast forward to today, and most communities have an entirely metered system. Your water use, and then they take a percentage of that for your sewer use. For some reason, EFC has come back to an EDU calculation. So not that many people, equivalent dwelling units.
Didn't we do a calculation for that at some point? Somebody?
I did a calculation for Cohoes. It's all based on water use. And it's based on what typical 1 and 2 family uses, and that is like 1 EDU. And that average water use, you then have to go to commercial and then industrial and see what their water use is. And get an average, commercial use average and industrial use average. And then you end up seeing that usage, you divide the residential EDU into both the commercial and the industrial. And that'll give you how many, well, EDUs that the commercial represents and that the industrial represents. So you do that, then you add them all together, and that is your total EDUs for the system.
And to complicate it more with the county water purification district, between the formula for the contract with the communities and the communities rates, if you're trying to look at the impact, it's different for each community.
Right. And the thing is, because there's so many averages, it's a number that's meaningless.
It sounds very meaningless to me.
Yeah.
Particularly when you have the actual data about.
Well, people are using, this is what EMC wants.
ECU fits into some calculation that they're doing. That's what it is.
Mhm.
When we know what water usage is, we know what water usage is, we know how much we generate, we know how much we use, and we know how much we lose. So,
But EFC will not permit an application to go forward unless you provide an EDU now,
Yeah,
at least on their grants.
yeah. So it's just kind of
I've got to do it for the grant.
and depending on the reviewer on the EFC side, it's more or less of a problem.
They just want to see some numbers.
Mhm.
All right, they want to see that it's come from the municipality, that there's a number, and that it's signed by somebody.
Mhm.
All right. Unfortunately, the person that signs it, you ought to have some basis of how you got to that number. Even though the number is really meaningless in real life,
Yeah,
you still should have a basis of how you determine that, in case somebody, someone questions it.
You're such a man of integrity, Gary. I admire you.
but
CYA.
but it depends on how you charge for the sort of stuff anyway. Like Albany has a tiered system where our large users pay more than our residential users. So the impact is different depending on whether residential user or large user.
Yeah, ours is not tiered. So whatever you use, it's X amount of,
Yeah,
it's way too low, 4,000. Oh, yeah.
and of course, in some cases in the towns, you have a property tax for the debt service stuff and a user charge for to figure out the cost. But the EDU thing doesn't really mean anything. It's not what you're charging the customer necessarily.
And even some of the staff at EFC knows, because I've had this discussion before with them. But their reply is, we're being told that we need EDU calculation and it can't go forward until you get that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So anyway, that's just some of the stuff we have to do filling out the forms. I know it's complicated too, if you got multiple projects and do I include every project? You know, they usually ask what the impact of this project is, and do you have other projects?
Yeah.
We have a whole long list of our other projects. So we tend to have what we already have in long-term debt. And then the short-term notes are the list afterwards. Rates are gonna have to go up, that's all it is.
Gary, when you did that EDU calculation, you know, last one. Or you just
No, we ended up, I had, DeCoco run me, water use from, we do a quarterly billings, so that's what he utilized. He did that, and we cross-referenced with, the assessor's office on how many one and two families and then how many. But yeah, it was all based on number, not what. Not what was being manufactured.
Correct. Okay, is there anything else that we need to discuss?
And actually, we have a little, Maggie and myself at the meeting or so, we talked to, Angelo on a boat. And it turns out that when we do the sampling, they have a boat. They actually haven't used it for a little while. They've got to make sure that it's still water worthy.
This is good, I like this. Yeah.
Okay.
Our boat was the same way. That's what in the water, but we kept it inside.
Just
So,
launch it, you'll find out.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, somebody is gonna launch it
Okay.
and find out.
We might as well all find out together.
Make sure the bill's fine.
Um. Now, one of the things that they did say is, if, the boat meets the regs and can float, we can use it.
Oh, that's nice.
Now, what they also said though is because of staff reductions, they are not gonna be able to contribute as many people. Well, they may be able to contribute maybe boat person or something like
Yeah.
that, but that's probably about it.
The crew,
I don't. There may be a captain.
I could send all my interns out to do the sampling, I'm sure they would love it.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind scooping up the water, and putting it in a bottle, that's easy. As long as someone else can like drive the boat, I don't know much about that. But I don't mind doing the sample selection and the change of custody and all that, I can do all that stuff.
Well, we are, and that's another thing that we'll probably have to go back to the different communities too, to see if there's anyone that's available, because it was a combination that we had used the first time. You know, the different DPWs, some of their people ended up getting volunteered to help out with the sampling. So it was, district personnel, and it may have been on both sides. It may have been both Rensselaer County and Albany County Sewer District. Along with, I know Gaho's DPW had contributed people. I'm pretty sure Troy contributed a few people. And then the consultants ended up filling in with, some people, because it was a pretty, strenuous
well, you.
exercise.
Seven transects and.
I thought there was 11 transects.
14 people on the boat.
Yeah, 11 transects. And there were three different, we did it on both shorelines and in the center. You know, at different depths.
Yeah, you're not gonna do that all in one day.
And
That's
we did that,
Yeah,
we did that over a certain period of time.
yeah. That's definitely not a one day event.
Matter of fact, I think at that point in time, we did some at night also. But
Just bring it up.
you gotta remember, we were doing that to get engineering report to a point where it would be acceptable, because we were doing a demonstrative approach, not a presumptive approach. So I think your suggestion at one of the last meetings, we ought to sit down with DEC and indicate that database that we got was great for the engineering report to push us forward on the demonstration portion. Now, we're just doing verification of results. And I would push that we don't need as many transects. Whether we still need 3 spots per transect, that I don't know, you know, I'd love to reduce that. But I don't know if DEC, but I think 11 sections of the river is a little ridiculous at this point. I would like to see maybe cut it down to like 5, 6.
Right.
You know, what's coming in, what's going out, and then particular points, like down near Big C,
Right, if it was
um,
like how fall.
and right,
Yeah.
just below Troy,
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, the big projects were the disinfection of the wastewater treatment plants. Big C, Big C project.
yeah, because the engineering report said it wasn't dissolved oxygen we're looking at, it was bacteria.
Mhm.
So the disinfection of the plants, yeah, that had a huge effect.
So maybe, reduce the number of transects.
Yeah,
Hmm.
I would love to see that, because then it costs us a lot less. Because the consultants are probably gonna have to step up to do a lot more. You know, we could provide the boats and stuff like that, but everybody's lacking in manpower. When you turn to the consultants, they're not being paid the same as municipal employees,
Right,
so.
right, that's a good point, yeah. Becomes an expensive boat ride.
Yes, it does.
Yeah, seriously, yeah, if you're out there for a week or. You know.
Or more,
Yeah, exactly, right, this could end up being a costly venture.
and if you're on off hours, you're paying overtime.
Right, if they.
Just ask Riverkeeper to do it.
There we are.
Yeah, they're the ones that we're checking on, because they'll be coming through with samples also at the same time.
Hmm.
And also, we were relying on Albany County Sewer District on their lab previously. And that won't be available this time because they're in a dispute with State Health Department currently on the lab. And they can't do any work for outside parties. They can only do Albany County District work currently until this dispute gets settled, whenever that may be. And I would be able, I would say, no, it's not counting.
Or would we have to, RFP the lab work then? Or do it through the consultant?
I would do it through the consultant.
Yeah, did we ever hear what like the sampling, like the analytes parameters were? Is that in there somewhere?
It's in the plan.
Okay. But
Yeah.
just-
We were sampling for E. coli and, the other, yeah. Yes, which is an expensive test.
Hmm.
Almost why we even need that.
It's what they use more for the marine, it's more for the ocean beaches than.
Correct, and I,
At one time, they thought EPA was gonna do that. The standard. So our speeds permit for Beaver Creek is having us monitor fecal. But the design was based on, too low reduction in pterococcus. Doing our dose response, for that. We're getting a similar result for both fecal and pterococcus. So. Yeah, that's another question. Do we really have to do Entero or can we just do fecal?
right,
We were having to have, Adirondack, we're using as lab, but they're sending out for the enterococcus, so
Oh, okay.
it's.
Do they go to Pace or? Seems like a lot
Yeah.
of roads lead there these days, but
Yeah, I forget which
Okay.
one, but,
either way, it's gonna be a costly venture, it sounds like.
it is on that, because it's,
they're both just surrogates.
yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
I'll do, I'm gonna look at that a little bit.
the walk, you know, it's,
Mhm.
I mean, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I mean, if there was somebody in DEC who really thought enterococcus was important, but maybe the permanent people aren't, maybe EPA and DEC aren't that keen on this one, so.
I have a feeling that probably somebody, my assumption on personal opinion, was that the push came from EPA.
So we'll talk to the joint venture team about coming up with a proposal to DEC to reduce the number of transects and maybe reduce the number of analytes.
Mhm.
and just do people.
Yeah.
Let's see how that goes. Anything else, or can we have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Andrew, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, happy summer, everybody.